going with the program, and he can swing in. We were going to give him the first slot since he's the most senior person present. But anyway, gentlemen, can I invite you to join me? So I think we're all very well aware of the developments in the last 24 hours with the sentencing of Yingluck Shinawatra to 5 years in prison for criminal negligence in the oversight of a rice pledging scheme that went bad. The implications going forward are, of course, of great significance to everybody. And we're very lucky tonight to have three distinguished panelists, two of whom are here. We have Ajahn Thitinan Pongsudirak, who is an award-winning columnist writing the Bangkok Post and numerous foreign publications. He's an associate professor at Chulalongkorn University's Faculty of Political Science and a director of the Institute for Science and International Security, ISIS, unfortunate name. And then we have an old friend of the club, Natakon Devakun, who's a former Bangkok Post columnist, and he's best known at the moment hosting the Daily Dose on Voice TV, which is still in business, amazingly. And it's the country's only one. Is it still here? Ah, great, wonderful. Perfect timing. So I just finished on Natakon. He's a graduate of Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies, and he's so far run for Bangkok governor only once.
Just in time.
Have you had a drink? Are you comfortable?
Okay.
And, with immaculate timing, we have Pongtep Kanjana, who's a former judge and who played a leading role in the drafting of the 1997 Constitution. He was a co-founder and deputy leader of the Thai Party, and served at various times as Justice Minister, Energy Minister, and Minister in the Prime Minister's office under Thaksin. He was one of over 100 politicians who were banned for 5 years from politics, if you recall, and he returned to political life in 2012 and went on to serve as Deputy Prime Minister and Education Minister under Yingluck. Kumponte, a bit unfair since you're the first in, but you're also the most senior. Would you like to kick off with an assessment, basically, of where you see Pheu Thai now and how this verdict yesterday changed the political scene in Thailand?
May I suggest a first-come, first-served basis?
Well,
so
if that's quite
the early bird should have the right to speak first.
All right. So we've already had one argument at the table, but the early bird in that case will be Thitinan, Ajahn Thitinan, who lost out on the argument. So can I ask you to kick off?
Okay, I think good evening, everyone, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would have liked to hear first what Kun Pongtep would have to say, but since he needs time to catch his breath, I think you walked here, ran here, the traffic was probably a bit congested. So maybe how long, Dominic, 15 minutes?
Yeah, whatever you like.
Okay, so we know what's happened. Yingluck has been sentenced, former Prime Minister Yingluck has been sentenced for 5 years in jail. I'm really curious to see now what Kun Pongtep would have to say. For me, my first observation would be that Thailand remains stuck. It's still polarized. This is not a way to move on, not a way of reconciliation, of bridging the divide. On the Yingluck verdict itself, not surprising, and I would not be surprised if she left, back when she left, maybe that she knew or she wanted Kun Bunsong, Dayapirom to have a taste of it first, to see what comes out of that verdict. And then that verdict was pretty severe, 42 years in jail. So now I think that after 1 month, it's not surprising that after the Bunsong verdict, the Yingluck verdict, 5 years jail, not surprising. What it means is that the one side of the Thai divide will be very frustrated will be very frustrated. They'll see this trial as a kind of a unjust, a kind of a trumped-up trial, that she was a leader of a party, they campaigned on a certain policy, and that she was not accused of corruption, but of negligence, dereliction of duty. So the people that support her would be very upset, frustrated by this. Myself personally, I think that the rice pledging was a very flawed, profligate gamble. The idea is that you can buy up rice at a certain price, high price, and you also have to remember, I mean, Kun Pongtep comes on the Pheu Thai party. Every time the Thaksin party comes up, they always have a certain policy platform, and the policy platform is a winning platform, but it's conceived in a manipulative way, right? So the rice pledging, 1 ton is 15,000, which happens to be the same number as the salary guarantee for civil servants and for undergraduate degree, undergrad degrees, 15,000, which is consistent with another number, which is 300 for daily minimum wage, which happens to be the similar numbers to the 30 baht healthcare scheme that they had before. So there's something to the charge, to the accusation that they are gambling the fiscal purse, the state budget, for votes, to come up with policies that are perhaps that pander, that are gimmicks that people can go to bed with, that people can sleep with, and therefore they can win election that way. And the name of the game is to win election, get into power, and then recoup or do whatever they like. So there's some validity to me to that charge. Now, to go so far as to say that Yingluck as Prime Minister and Pheu Thai party leader overseeing this policy that was an election pledge, that this ended up being a criminal verdict of 5 years, that's going to be a very tough benchmark for any Thai leader, any Thai Prime Minister, backward and forward. So if you go back in the past, and if you take the assumption that Thai governments, we have had a lot of corruption, a lot of graft, technically, if you stretch it far enough, all previous and future Thai Prime Ministers will go to jail. Because if there's corruption, how could a Thai Prime Minister not be ultimately responsible for it? So it's frustrating to me because there's some validity to the charge. Yes, these are pandering schemes, just like we saw in the earlier Thaksin generation in 2001, 2, 3. But yet we see it again, but going too far with this conviction, I don't think that it's going to lead us to any kind of compromise or reconciliation that Thailand needs to move on. So that's the Yingluck verdict, some truth to it, but very severe sentence and an impossible standard if they want to prosecute in a consistent fashion. Yingluck herself, I think, is now, with this conviction, it would be very tough for her to shake it off, to come back, even if there's some kind of a clearing of the deck through some kind of a pardon. I don't think this will cover that. So she'll be in exile, and her place of choice probably will be somewhere that I think that, Yingluck is unlike Thaksin. She didn't sign up to go to jail. I mean, this is not her party. She's a young sister, and they now have run out of family members to lead the party. So I think she'll find somewhere that is a little bit comfortable, and maybe somewhere that her son, her only son, can go to school so you can narrow down the choices. I think we'll probably see her asylum requests coming through very soon, and she'll probably be getting asylum. This is a very unusual case, and she has, I'm sure she has collected, her team, her legal team, has collected all the evidence, all the papers, and the case is that the whole trial was very unusual. I mean, there were late submissions, there were, it was hasty fashioned. So all of this will play into her asylum request, and I'm sure that, I'm fairly certain that she'll get asylum. Her political future, more or less, finished from there. Very difficult for her to kind of come back And she's not like Thaksin, who's going to agitate from outside, who's going to run the show from outside. She's not, I don't think she has that kind of appetite and instinct. Thaksin, with this setback for the Pheu Thai party, I think now the party has run out of family members to run it. And you can see that the party is really too much of a family-run, family-owned party. It's like the Shinawatra party. You know, it's like Thaksin, Yingluck. So maybe this is something, a chance, an opportunity for the party, which is now rudderless, without a clear leadership. It will have to be realigned. We will have to see what kind of leadership comes in its place. I don't think the party will be dissolved now. There's always a case, a chance that the party would be dissolved if it's too strong. But now I think with the Yingluck verdict, the party will probably be allowed to go on, to operate at with a much weaker force. There'll be maybe perhaps some realignment, some defections. So Pheu Thai will be much less of a potent force than it was in 2011, July 2011 election. And going back to the Thai Thai in 2001, 2005, the People's Power Party, the Palang Prachachon in 2007. So that's the kind of the Thaksin camp. The party scene as a result will be much weaker. What's happened now with this, the longer term concern would be that the executive branch in Thai politics, in Thai government, is very weak. Now, you know, you can be dissolved, banned, convicted, all kinds of things can happen. No one's going to join Thai politics. And if you do join Thai politics, your future could end anytime. I mean, the way to do it, somebody will file a charge, the charge will be accepted, and you'll be having charges hanging over your head, your career, your tenure for the entire time. And if you don't behave, these charges can be activated, exercised, and go against you. So it has been very discouraging, I think, for party development, for the maturation, development of parliamentary democratic institutions in Thailand. The party system now is much weaker. The executive branch is much weaker. On the flip side, the judiciary now is, I think, much more politically assertive than ever. It has always been in the last 12 years very assertive. But now I think, again, we see it just like in 2008, in 2007, when Thai Thai was dissolved on May 29, 2007. And again, People's Power Party in early December 2008. Now no party is strong. The party that should benefit from all of this, and unfortunately it's not represented here, is the Democrat Party. And the Democrat Party, this is a chance, and I will say this, you know, they have been given a kind of a godsend. They have had a lot of help along the way, you know, from the army, from the judiciary over the years. They have not been able to win any election. They're not here, so I don't want to say too much. But this is a chance for them to offer an alternative for Thailand, a way out of this crisis, this quagmire. But to do so, I think they have to make some changes. You cannot have a same party, the same lineup, same leadership that loses election time and again. In 2005, in 2007, in 2011. And you look at it, it's still the same party, the same leadership, the same faces. This is not going to be the way out of the crisis for Thailand, not going to be the way forward for Thailand. So it's really their chance and their choice whether to make some changes or not. If not, there will be a party to reckon with, but there are also splits within the party. There's a split within the party. So the Democrat Party, I think, they are hedging. I think that the leadership would like to be in government again. That's why they don't make any strong statement. They kind of playing very slippery, conditional, hypothetical, but not really putting their foot down on any particular principle. So Thailand is in search of a political party that can lead the country out of this period of political crisis that's gone on for 12 years now. And it seems to me that it's not a rocket science. It's not easy to form a political party in Thailand. You need money, organization, people, networks, especially in the countryside. But the platform doesn't seem so hard. I mean, you want to be a party that stands against corruption. We've seen that, and you know, the Democrat Party is not bad on this front. The party leader is not corrupt at all. We can see that, but that's not enough. Party that has to be elected, have electoral legitimacy, a party that not corrupt, but also must know what to do, right? Must know what to do in terms of policy platform, innovation, you know, moving Thailand forward, ideas. We haven't seen that yet. Another dimension for a party, a winning party, would be electoral legitimacy, which means that they cannot be a pro-military party, right? So if you come up with a platform with a general principles, not pro-coup, anti-corruption, with some ideas, and these ideas to narrow inequality, to have Thailand 4.0, you can adopt that, spin it in a different way. And these three planks, this is what a party that Thailand can do with. So I don't know why we haven't had this kind of imagination, but it's just waiting to happen. The rules are stacked against it. The military now has the upper hand. I think now we will see elections next year. I think that when they say that they don't know when the election will be, it's that they don't want to put the pressure on the election timetable. But the organic laws can be put in place expeditiously, and if they want to have election, it can happen by the second half of next year. And now with Yingluck gone, Pheu Thai weakened, there's a good chance that the junta, the military junta, will go for election. If we see they come up with their own party, then you can see that as a sign of election being imminent. You can see now that the Prime Minister is doing these mobile cabinets, mobile cabinet meetings. That's a sign that election is coming. When he talks about parties and when he's playing kind of cagey about whether he comes back or not, that's a sign that election is coming. So when the election does come, in this environment, we can have a weak kind of a post-election coalition government. The military will have 1/3 of the parliament. The Senate will be the military party. The military already has a big party. It will have the biggest party. The Senate will be the military party. And then the lower house with the mixed member apportionment, there'll be no big party. There'll be a mix. And medium-sized parties, smaller parties will have a chance. And then it will come down to the numbers game. What kind of numbers you can come up with after the election. And there'll be a lot of horse trading, coalition formation, and a lot of deals behind the scenes and so on. And we've seen this before in Thailand. So we're seeing Thai politics going back to the 1990s, maybe in the 1980s. Whether that is good or bad for Thailand, if it can regain the kind of footing that it had back then, you know, Thailand is never a settled, smooth, you know, organized, peaceful, tidy place. It's always unruly, unwieldy. It's just the way it is. And it's okay, it's the Thai character. They have a lot of squabbling, bickering, infighting, stabbing each other in the back, factionalism. This is very normal. It's the same in Myanmar and other countries. But in the past, there was always a way of moving ahead. So Thai politics had an election, had a coup, had a constitution, election, coup, fine, but the Thai economy expanded. Thailand became, look around you, in the last 60, 70 years. This time, I'm very worried. I'm worried that the last 12 years will be the new Thailand. It will be protracted, messy, to no end. That there will be no settlement, no modus operandi, no understanding of how things should and could work. The key will be the military. I think that our new king, His Majesty, also with the monarchy, will be also a crucial role. It's always been that case. In the past, Thailand has had very strong trinity of institutions, monarchy, military, bureaucracy, they rule the land. Now you have other institutions, weakened, but they're still there. And the forces are in their favor. International norms, expectations, bottom-up pressure, people have more political consciousness, access, stakes in the system. So Thai politics is no longer about just the elites, but also the masses. So that's how I kind of see the future unfolding. First, whether we can come to some kind of a compromise and new understanding between the traditional players and the various players, protagonists, the key institutions. The rules are crooked. These rules are going to make the environment very lopsided. And eventually there'll be election. There will be election. And that will be the juncture where changes could take place. The relationship between the military and the monarchy will be the key. And how that is going to unfold, we don't know. This is the first time that we've had this situation in 70 years. But it's consequential. And I do hope, and I try to work for it, that somehow the various players have to realize that so much has been squandered and wasted over the past decade that they have to come to new terms of agreement, of arrangement, and these new terms are not there yet, And the reason they're not there is because the major players are still in a period of transition. Cremation has not taken place, coronation has not taken place, but inevitably there has to be a new kind of reckoning. Thailand will have to be some kind of a electoral rule with whether democratic institutions are strengthened. This we don't know. It has been systematically weakened. But I don't think that the traditional institutions, especially the military, can hold sway the way that the generals intend to. So we will have a lot of tension coming up. And I hope that the tension will be alleviated, will be worked out so that there's a new calibration. But if not, then we have to brace ourselves for tension leading to some turmoil. When I have a bad day, I think that maybe that will have to be the case. Just because, for things to get better, to a new kind of workable normal, you almost have to have things get worse a bit. Maybe it's just the way things are going to unfold. Thank you.
Thank you. And Thitinan, that's pretty depressing. Sorry. Kun Pongtap, you're actually the only person in here that's been on the receiving end of a judgment, and you were disqualified as a politician for 5 years. Where is Pheu Thai now, following what happened yesterday?
I enjoy what Dr. Thitinan spoke very much, and I would like to hear Nattakon give his opinion first. Then, as the latecomer, I'll be able to add something, even if I almost agree with everything Dr. Thitinan said, and of course with what Kun Prym is going to say.
All right. Hot anticipation. Are you live?
Okay. All right. Just a few comments first. If the Prime Minister starts kissing a frog, which he did, he kissed a frog a month ago, and if he starts getting on the tractor and doing the rice work, then he's probably campaigning, preparing for a political future. So Dr. Thitinan talked about the numbers game, and they have the numbers. They have 250 senators that will be in place to help raise their hands for the next prime minister. So it's pretty much stacked. Let's talk about I'm not going to talk about the verdict because it's not a verdict. It's a press release. Reporters were waiting yesterday for the ruling, and including reporters from our network, and they were running out with essentially a press release. What kind of unique about Thailand, and maybe they do this in other countries, but I don't think it's the normal standard. Instead of writing the individual verdicts first and then coming together to find common ground and then have a full verdict, and then making that more precise, more concise, and issuing a press release, or really not having to issue a press release, just release the verdict, instead of having individual verdicts and then coming together and having perhaps, I don't know how it actually works, but in the case of Obamacare, the Supreme Court Chief Justice basically wrote the conclusion, the final one, and that was issued to the media. Well, here it's a press release, so I'm going to make just a brief critique, not a criticism, because you can't criticize the verdict really, but just a brief critique of the press release. I felt it was very well written. It was very, and it was very reasonable. And when you're writing a paper, let's say if you're in high school, you're writing a paper, you're essentially taught to write in the way that would prepare the reader for some sort of an ending that would convince you that the conclusion in the end is just and fair. And as a normal reader, let's say if I had no previous understandings of the rice pledging schemes, and let's say if the only thing that I've heard over the past month is the 40-year in jail guilty verdict for Kun Bun Song, former Commerce Minister, if that's the only thing that I have been predisposed to, more than likely reading the press release yesterday, I would probably be totally convinced that this is a merciful ruling. Merciful ruling for Kun Yingluck, meaning that she only got 5 years in jail instead of the 40 years that her Commerce Minister got. So I think that's the sense that was meant to be portrayal to the general public, who may not have a full understanding of the whole rice pledging scheme or other details of the witch hunt that has gone down the past 10 years. So I think reading it in a layman's perspective, very convincing, very reasonable, and it make it almost look like that there are probably people saying that, hey, Kun Yingluck, I'm not saying this, I'm saying, but there are probably people who are somewhere in the middle, who are not red shirts, who are not in the Suthep camp, who are not pro-Democrat, pro-Pheu Thai. I think people who are down the middle probably felt that, this was okay, this was deserving. Now, if it came out like Yingluck got 40 years, or 30 years like Bun Song, that would have been seen as harsh. So to me, strategically, this works, meaning that it doesn't look crazy. Because the worst thing that could be done for the Thai judiciary system is some sort of a verdict that is excessive. All right, so now that's the positive side. Now, what I'm looking for, positive meaning for the sake of stability in society, okay? Not for the sake of fairness or whatever else, okay? That's not the issue right now. Now, on the negative side, to me, I'm still looking for more, meaning that I want to read the full verdict. Because just reading the press release, the final conclusion before they issue, the final paragraph, she gets 5 years. The couple of paragraphs before it, and eventually there'll probably be an English language translation. The couple of paragraphs leading to the final conclusion, it presents, a few details about how Yingluck was essentially culpable or negligent in not preventing the action of Kun Bun Song. Personally, I'm just waiting for more of that story, those evidence, because I think in the full verdict there'll probably be more details. Okay, so critiquing the press release from an essay writing perspective, I basically wanted more paragraphs on how she was culpable. I mean, I was thoroughly convinced halfway through reading it that Kun Bun Song is like, you know, totally corrupt. As reading it as a normal guy looking at, you know, it's probably like a full page on Bun Song. Okay, now this is the issue for the Pheu Thai party. I'm just throwing this out, okay, for people who are following their base. There is this belief out there, you know, that Kun Bun Song, and this is for the base, this is for supporters of Yingluck, this is for Red Church folks. Okay. There's this belief out there that, okay, even though it's been a 10-year witch hunt against the Shinawatra family, it may be the case that Kun Bun Song was actually corrupt, that this fake G2G deal, these fake G2G deals actually took place. There's a belief in Yingluck's base and the Pheu Thai party's base that maybe he did something wrong. Maybe not her, maybe he did something wrong. And if throughout the process, with the two verdicts, one for Kun Bun Song and one for Kun Yingluck, there is a sense of doubt that can be sown into the minds of Thaksin supporters that Bun Song was legitimately guilty, then perhaps Thaksin's base and Yingluck's base will accept this verdict and slowly convince themselves that the Thai judiciary system is not that bad. So, like I've said earlier, strategically, I think it's well written and it sounds reasonable. And that's a problem for the Democratic side. Because to be honest, I mean, they were waiting for like a 30 or 40-year verdict, okay? All right, so 5 years, it sounds merciful, okay? Now, in the big picture, this is not about the verdict, this is not about the courts. In the big picture, I mean, when they talk about mercy, I mean, how does a dictatorship survive in Thailand? With some sense of mercy, you know, for the people. You can't do a hard dictatorship, right? I mean, that's how the Thai dictatorship has survived all this time. So, okay, that's basically my take on the press release, okay, because I'm waiting to read the full verdict. I got more to say about Thailand's deep state and all that stuff, but I'll add that in later, after Kun Buk Thep.
So you can't escape now, you're going to have to talk.
Thank you, Kun Dominic. I have heard a lot from our distinguished speakers. I will not foresee the future of Thailand as Dr. Thitinan just foresaw, because E.T., the fortune teller in Myanmar, just passed away. So very difficult to look how the future of Thailand will be. Let me start with the verdict. Not to go into detail about the verdict, but from the press release, what I can say is that the Supreme Court decided on the question of facts that Yingluck was negligent. As I used to be in the judiciary, I used to decide the case myself when I was at the trial court. I used to review the draft judgment of the Supreme Court justices when I were in the Supreme Court. The process of deciding case, especially on question of facts, normally all the judges, but not normally in the Supreme Court, a quorum of 3 judges, only 1 judge will go through the file. If I were the responsible judge myself, I read through all the documents. All the documents. But if you have been to the court, in Yingluck case, the document is more than 100,000 pages. Huge. And it is unlikely that any judge will read all. I do not believe myself, of course, that we will have diligent judges to read all 100,000 of documents. But they have assistant judge to read for them. And okay, of course, I wonder whether those assistant judges will be very diligent to go through all. But normally, before we reach, because we have to go through all the testimony of the witnesses, we have to go through all the documents, then we consider whether the defendant is guilty or not. When we consider that, okay, the defendant is guilty, we will find some supporting evidence or supporting testimony of witness to write in our judgment. The same thing, the same case, if I decide that, okay, the defendant is innocent, I will find some supporting evidence in the same case file to support my finding. So when you read the judgment or the press release, of course, if the judgment is about the guilty verdict, we will have a lot of supporting evidence that the defendant is guilty. But for the innocent verdict, it will be different. So very difficult for people outside to criticize judgment, especially on the question of facts. We can more easily criticize the finding on the question of law, because that's much easier. We don't have to go through all the documents, all the witness testimony. But for the question of facts, it's totally different. And for a very, very capable judge, I can say that even if the case is 70% to 30%, 70% the defendant should be free. But if a capable judge for the 30% verdict, 30% conviction, he can write a judgment that when people read, will agree with him. So it depends on what? It depends on the integrity of the judge. That's the most important. And even different judges decide the question of facts differently. That happens all the time. One case, the same case, the trial court may say the defendant is guilty. When the case was sent to the Court of Appeals, the Court of Appeals may say, no, he is innocent. When they go to the Supreme Court may consider innocent or guilty. That happens all the time. I remember when I worked at the Supreme Court, there was one draft judgment sent to me. The quorum wrote an innocent judgment. But I went through the file. I said the evidence was so clear that the defendant was guilty. So I told the judge, the responsible judge, that no, the defendant is guilty. He said no. He said he is innocent. So I wrote my memorandum to the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, but we have to go through the Assistant Justice and to the Vice President of the Supreme Court. All of them agreed with me. And so the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, who later became a privy councillor, had to withdraw that case from that quorum and assign to another quorum. So what I mentioned is that the question of facts is very difficult to criticize even if we have the full verdict, because we do not have an opportunity to go through all the supporting evidence and the testimony of the witnesses. Okay. So I can stop about the verdict. In terms of the judgments, so many judgments in the past 10 years, we have seen what's so-called double standard. And I can compare those cases, those similar cases. But how the court deal with those cases were totally different. Were totally different. We have seen, and in respect of the discretion of judge, for example, Dr. Thitinan is a well-known professor. If he, by somehow, becomes a defendant in a criminal case, and then the court found him guilty, the question is whether the court should impose suspension sentence or not. If the court wants to impose non-suspension sentence, we can write that he is a well-known professor. He should be well aware of right and wrong. But he still committed this heinous crime. So no suspension. But if the court wants to give him suspension, oh, he is a professor, well-known professor. He has taught so many students. He has served our educational system. So we give him suspension sentence. So, you know, this is the way how it works.
It's totally arbitrary.
It's the way how it works.
It's arbitrary.
Yeah, but I mean, if the decision, if the judges are doing their job in good faith, with integrity, we have to accept that. But whether we have that system in Thailand applying now is a question that some people may wonder. Okay, now we can just stop. Let me stop about the Yingluck case. But I try to look at the future of Thai politics. Dr. Thitinan mentioned that the verdict in Yingluck case will weaken the Pheu Thai party. I would like the junta and the NCPO to believe what Dr. Thitinan just said, that the verdict weakened Pheu Thai party. I'm not sure whether Kun Prayut will think like that or not. But I can tell you one thing. Pheu Thai party and the previous parties, Thai Rak Thai, starting with Thai Rak Thai, then People Power Party, and then Pheu Thai party. We experienced loss of leadership, a major loss of leadership after the coup of 2006. At that time, 111 executive members of our party were barred from politics for 5 years, including the then leader, Dr. Thaksin Shinawatra. And those executive members of the party didn't have the right to defend themselves in the court at all. Very strange, but they were deprived of their voting rights for 5 years. At that time, I were the first politician to go back to the party headquarters just right after the coup, because I was wondering what our staff were doing. And a couple of days later, Dr. Thaksin sent a letter to me for reading to the press. It's the resignation letter. I read that letter to members of the press. I remember one foreign journalist asked me whether I was acting like a curtain boy, crossing the curtain, which meant the end of Thai Party. I told him, said no, but I didn't explain. After that, I received, at that time Kun Jaturon came to join me and another person. I received a lot of letters from our former MPs resigning from the party. They were pressured by some people in uniform. So they had to send a resignation letters to the party. After a while, about 6 or 7 months, I was surprised. Those former MPs who resigned reapply. So I asked them why. We understand that you had been pressured to leave, but why did you come back? They said that the voters in that constituency told them that if they do not rejoin, they would not vote for them. So I think the main point is your popular base. It's your popular base. Of course, people may think that with Prime Minister Yingluck away, Pheu Thai may be weakened. But I think will be weakened or be stronger. It depends on the popular base, which have not been tested yet. Pheu Thai party at this moment has to reform our party. Pheu Thai party is not just headed by the Shinawatra's family. We have Dr. Thaksin, then we have Samak Suntaravet. Samak Suntaravet is no relative to Shinawatra family. So, not only Shinawatra's family in our leadership, we have so many others. Of course, we have to work as a group more than a single leadership, which we consider that is good for the party and for the country. But right now, all political parties are not allowed to conduct any political activities. So you will not hear much from any political party, including Pheu Thai party, especially in how we will transform. So I think I have speak quite a bit now, so you can...
Now we can ask you some questions. Just quickly, just to pick up on that, am I right in thinking that Yingluck would not have been able to lead the Pheu Thai party at the next election because she was removed from office by a constitutional court ruling. So she would not have been in play, in fact. So in that sense, it hasn't changed. Who in Pheu Thai would have been moving up to fill that gap anyway? Forget about the verdict.
Okay. So Prime Minister Yingluck was impeached by the National Legislative Assembly. And I believe that they will interpret that she be out of office from any political office for 5 years. Even if I totally disagree that the National Legislative Assembly appointed by the junta will have the power to impeach others. In terms of the leadership of the party, I think we have to separate. After our first party, Pheu Thai, Thai Rock Thai Party was dissolved, I told our fellow MPs not to be in the executive committee of the party. Some of them did not give much weight to what I said, but they realized my advice so well. When our second party, the People Power Party, was dissolved, and all of them were barred from politics for 5 years. So you can see that in Pheu Thai Party, Madam Yingluck was not in the executive committee of Pheu Thai Party. If she had been in the executive committee of Pheu Thai Party, I can guarantee that Pheu Thai Party would have been dissolved long time ago. Because that's the way they used to get rid of the Prime Minister. So the executive members of the party will be some group, but may not like the Democrats. The Democrats can have Kun Abhisit as the leader of the party, because the Democrat will survive any party dissolution case, but not Pheu Thai Party. I think you can see, okay, after the junta allows political party to conduct political activities, you will see the new leader and the executive members of Pheu Thai Party. But I think that the more important will be who Pheu Thai Party will propose, will nominate as the prime ministers. We can have up to 3 nominations. It's quite strange, right?
Yes.
In politics, right? This party have.
It's constitutionally demanded
and
that you propose 3.
Titinan and Dominic. And the public will question, and who will be your real prime minister?
Yes, just can I make a point on this? It's actually written in the constitution, right, that these parties are supposed to propose 3. But on the Pheu Thai side, I feel that the guilty verdict, because Kun Yingluck has to be abroad, weakens Pheu Thai organizationally, to me, briefly, organizationally. But politically, as long as the members of parliaments don't leave, the popularity doesn't go away. As long as you find someone with the rhetoric to campaign against the quote-unquote dictatorship. I mean, whatever, the deep state, the junta, whatever, okay? You need someone with a fiery rhetoric to carry the mission, carry the torch on. But organizationally, of course, with Kun Yingluck gone, it's difficult to see who's in charge, but that can be established very quickly. I mean, so.
Kumpongtep, you're the only person in this room who could be asked to be Prime Minister of Thailand. If it happened, what would you say?
What I can say is that we have quite a number of politicians in our party,
right,
whom we can nominate as the Prime Minister to fill the 3 nominations. And I would say that we are likely to nominate 3 names. Why? Because if we nominate only one person, this person may be sabotaged anytime. He may be sabotaged anytime, right? And even if we win the election, we will have no person to nominate. So we have to utilize our opportunity of nominating 3 names. So you can wait next year. We believe that the election will be held, I mean, according to the constitution. That is almost unavoidable that the election must be held by the second half of next year. And by the time you see our 3 nominations.
If I could use a Trumpish term, just briefly, if I could use a Trumpish term for Thailand, if you were here, he'll probably say, what the fake media is trying to say is that they're trying to portray that the guilty verdict will weaken Pheu Thai. The weakening of Pheu Thai in the next election has been caused by the way that the Constitution is written. The Constitution is written at the moment so that the Senate will be helping in the process of electing the next Prime Minister. So that's 250 people. The members of parliament will round out at 500. And there's a cap on the winning party. So you can't win a landslide majority because the Constitution says so. So it's capped at around 260, I think. So if you're Pheu Thai and you normally win 300 easy, right? Okay. And you could probably win again, even fielding somebody else. If you get the district MPs at 260, I think, you kind of ruled out from getting party listed MPs because they'll basically allocate the party listed MPs, the 100 party listed MPs, to the losing parties. So the Constitution itself has already weakened Pheu Thai, preventing it from winning a total landslide. So that's what the media should focus on, really. The verdict is not weakened Pheu Thai. This Constitution has intentionally done that.
Right, we have a microphone in the middle of the room if anybody wants to ask a question. Before somebody does, Titinan, you paint an incredibly gloomy picture of the future of Thai life, the high price people are likely to pay if they want to become politicians. If you go back through all the coups over the years in Thailand, the one thing that the military always does is give itself an amnesty. So it signs it off, it lets itself off. They've now made the point with this very strong verdict against Yingluck that this is what happens. If you're corrupt, you get prosecuted, it's finished. They've made the point. They could suspend it, I don't know the technicalities of the law, but there's always this amnesty option that they could pull back and say, right, we've made the point, we'll clear the slate. Is that something that might happen next year as the new reign gets going? We need to clear the decks and basically refresh Thailand. Is that something conceivable, or do you think it's going to sit there on the books?
I just came back from Cambodia, so I don't use the word nasty lightly.
Yeah.
But I think that now the stakes are the highest that we've seen in Thai politics in several decades. Normally, we've had coups before, we've had 13 successful coups, 1920s constitutions, a number of elections and so on. It's par for the course for Thailand. But this time, it's different. It's rather nasty. It's not easy to come up with a new slate from this, because where do you draw the line? I think drawing a line would be very difficult. There are a number of criminal charges. There are all kinds of people having charges, including both sides, including a lot of small people that people in the countryside, people who are in jail who shouldn't be in jail because they took part in some protest. So, in a grand sweep, a grand clearing, it would be difficult to draw a line. I think the military this time, they also have done something they haven't done before. Giving themselves amnesty, writing a constitution is all par for the course. But this time they've systematically weakened the political party system, democratic institutions, and also they have, for the first time, they've ruled Thailand directly. So normally military coups are not uncommon, but military would come in and they would delegate, right? A lot of delegating. But this time the generals are the ministers, and they've stayed for over 3 years now. So they have a problem of getting out. They also have a lot to cover, a lot to protect when they get out. That's why they now will be tempted to stay for the foreseeable, because a lot to protect. So a blank slate, a new slate, not a blank slate, but a new slate, and a kind of a reset that we've had in the past. Very difficult. On the other hand, in the past, we haven't had this situation. Political parties came and went, you know, and then there's a coup, you know your place, and then you just go away quietly somewhere, and you're allowed back, as long as you don't fight the system. But when you defy, you fight back, and then you also win the election, then the powers on the other side, they keep coming right back. So this is a kind of a seesaw battle that we've been stuck with. It's very difficult to be positive. I mean, you look at the Constitution. What Khun Pleu mentioned, you know, if you win 260 constituencies, the maximum you can win overall would be 305, mixed member.
Oh, so you can still get some party listed MPs.
You can still get party listed.
But not over 305,
yes,
right?
But in an inverse order. So if suppose you win 60% of the constituencies, right? You get 60%. And if you have a party list, normally people who vote for you, they also vote for you on a party list. But it doesn't matter. Only get one ballot. The maximum you can get on a party list is 40%, because you already got 60%.
See, the thing is that, just briefly interrupting, the problem with Thailand is that they took these solutions that should be applied to other countries with problems of one-party rule, and then they applied it to Thailand. So Thailand effectively is a functioning dictatorial regime. We didn't need an electoral mechanism to make sure that there is no one-party rule. Because normally you don't have a one-party rule problem in Thailand. I mean, you know, this way that they make sure that no single party is able to get the landslide, I mean, that should be applied to other countries with a one-party problem. But they took that solution, that cure, and they threw it on Thailand. And then that's why we're stuck in this mess.
The reset is what this country desperately needs, right? In the past, there was a final arbiter that could come up with some kind of a grand resolution and say, okay, look, you know, let it be now, let's move on, let's put a stop to it. And people more or less would kind of accept. So there's a chance, I think, that with the new reign, a grand act of benevolence, if accepted by the various sides, from the benevolence, from the previous king's moral authority, there's a legacy, then maybe that could be our hope for a reset.
Interesting. Right, can you identify yourself?
My name is Matthias Peer. I'm a correspondent for the German business newspaper Handelsblatt, and I have a question for Khun Pongtep. Could you describe, please, the role Mr. Thaksin still plays currently for the Pheu Thai party, and what are your expectations? Which role will he play in the future?
About the role of Dr. Thaksin, I think his most important role is the policy platform that he started when he first found the Yingluck Thai party and the system, how the party worked for the people. Because we are the first political party in Thailand which is policy oriented. We won our first election by a landslide because of policy platform, not because of individual candidate. So that's the first time in Thailand that people voted all over Thailand for just one party because of policy platform. I think that's what he influenced the second party and Pheu Thai party. And another thing is his popularity, which still in the mind of a lot of people. So because of that, even if he does nothing, it helps Pheu Thai party gain several million votes already.
And do you think he will still have a part in Thai politics in the future?
People, especially up country, still remember him and think of him. So even if he does not get involved in politics or in matters in Thailand, but still he is still in the mind of a lot of Thai people for what he had done for him. For example, the universal health care. They benefited a lot from that health care, and they feel gratitude towards him. So I think it's like, you know, the people in several countries still think of some leaders who have done something good for them. That would be the same as like what the Thaksin.
Nigel.
First, just a very quick comment on the proposed electoral system. Party list systems are not uncommon, of course, around the world. And we just had the German elections, and they have such a system. Personally, speaking as a political scientist, I know of no other country that proposes a party list system that is designed quite like that set out in the new constitution. It's really not at all clear how exactly it will work in practice, although, as you suggest, it is designed, it seems quite explicitly, to impose upper limits on the extent to which the most popular parties' votes can be translated into seats. But it's a very peculiar variant by international standards. A question for anyone who wishes to address it. There seems to be a high degree of confidence in the panel that elections will be held next year. And I just wanted to sort of test that proposition. And here's as a devil's advocate speaking, that power is something that's attractive to those who hold it, and especially for those whose careers have been spent not in politics, but in institutions which involve giving and obeying orders. So could it not be the case that those who currently have power will find reasons to continue to hold it unless they come to the conclusion that the risks and costs of staying in power are greater than the risks and costs of allowing fresh elections to take place? Won't the temptation be to find reasons or excuses for staying on unless they really feel they have no alternative?
Yeah, but I get the sense that if General Prayut is certain that he's going to be Prime Minister after the election, then he's going to allow for the election to take place next August or November. You know, if he's certain that you know, no surprise is going to take place. Now that means that he has to trust the 250 senators that he'll leave behind to help you know, vote for him when Parliament session opens, and that he is certain that Pheu Thai will get probably less than 300 in the next election. Because if Pheu Thai gets more than 300, then at least Pheu Thai can say that there's a majority, you know, there's a mandate against the junta, and that Prayut cannot return as Prime Minister. So I think he has to be certain on two factors. The Senate is ready and willing to appoint him, and also that Pheu Thai will get less than a full majority. Now, there's one additional factor. I was just thinking about this. You know, I was just thinking the other day, why would they need to delay the election if they have the Senate, the appointed Senate's backing? I mean, there could be the chance that they might want to make sure that the next army chief is one of their guys, and so they need to leave that behind you know, before October 1st of next year rolls around. Because the current army chief is not necessarily, you know, under General Prayut's control, okay? So that's, you know, that's one potential risk for them. Hence, maybe the election after the October reshuffle, probably November, because they want to make sure that the new army chief doesn't do anything funny after the election. You know, I think all of them believe that the current army chief is a good guy, which he is. He's a pretty good guy actually. But the current army chief is a good guy in the kind of like you know, General Prayut camp kind of good guy. So not necessarily in the General Prayut camp kind of good guy.
So Thitinan, election late.
Nigel, this is going to be about power sharing. It's not one side or the other. The Constitution, even though it's crooked, it's lopsided, once the election takes place, there will be elected politicians. There will be also the military will control 1/3, 250 of upper chamber, and the numbers, the mixed member apportionment will keep big parties down. Now, we've had this before. Don't forget, we've had appointed senates before. Most of Thai constitutions have had appointed senates. We haven't had MMA before. And we also had this kind of civil-military power sharing before, in the 1980s, in the 1990s even. But this time, the question is, will it be enough? Will it be satisfactory? Will it answer expectations and questions after the last decade of turmoil and elections and dissolutions and so on? So I'm not sure about that. And unlike General Prem in the 1980s, General Prayut has a lot more to answer than General Prem. General Prem was incorruptible. He didn't have all these kind of nephew and brother and so on. So this civil military power sharing may not fly this time.
May I add a bit to that. Even if 250 senators can jointly vote with the MP for the selection of the Prime Minister, but for the no confidence motion, only the MPs can vote. So when Kun Prem mentioned 300 MPs or less, in fact, just 251 MPs, which is one more than the majority of the seats in the House, can sack the Prime Minister anytime. Furthermore, most bills will have to go through the House first. Only MPs can vote. So if a party controls more than 50% of the seats in the lower house, and if that party is not in the government, the government will find difficulty passing any bill.
Right, Phil.
Thanks. I'm Phil Robertson with Human Rights Watch. Actually, I wanted you to help fill in a couple questions I have about the sort of political prognostication of what's going on there. One is I wanted to get your opinions of who is going to be the sort of new Samakitam style party leader. You know, who is going to be the person who's going to be tapped by the NCPO to lead the pro-military party? What are your predictions? The second one is, what needs to be done to ensure that we won't have a rerun of what we had during the constitutional referendum, where we had basically a criminalizing of expression for one side of the Constitution. If you went and voted, spoke up for saying no to the Constitution, you were criminalized. And there's a whole bunch of people actually facing criminal charges and in the courts right now. And then the last thing, which is a really perplexing question, is what do you think might actually sort of prompt the sort of eerie silence from the North and the Northeast, the sort of quiescent red shirts, to finally stand up and sort of fight back for their rights?
Who would like to?
I'll just take the question on the fight back and the Samakitam. Samakitam, of course, was a pro-military party concocted by the military after the February 1991 coup. We've had big military parties in the past, from the 1957, Seri Manang Kasila with Jom Thanom, the Field Marshal Thanom in the early 70s, late 60s. It was the Sahap Prasha Thai, and Samaki Tham in early 1990s. So looks like this time, Phil, there is not going to be a major pro-military concocted party. It will be a combination of incumbent parties, Pheu Thai, Democrat, and then of course Phum Jai Thai, and then there'll be newer parties, smallish, medium size, but it doesn't look like there's going to be a major pro-military juggernaut that's going to win the election for the military. And the military, I think this time, they don't need it. They've got the Senate, it's 250, but as Kun Pongtep said, it's very tricky for them because they wrote the rules, they stacked the rules, but they didn't go all the way. Going all the way would have meant that they would have given the Senate more legislative powers. This way, the House still has a lot of power. So the military needs 126 MPs to have a pro-military prime minister, right? But then after that, that pro-military prime minister is liable for machinations in the lower house, and the Senate can't do very much in terms of legislation. So on the party, I don't see a rising, emerging pro-military party juggernaut like Samaki Tham in 1991-92, March 1992 election. Now, on the fight back, eerie silence, I have two responses. First, I don't think that in the Thai system, and I also think a lot about this, how come Thai people are putting up with military dictatorship for 3 years and 4 months? This is like a blatant military dictatorship with Article 44, and this is also the same Thai people that overthrew military dictatorship in October 1973, in May 1992, with flying colors, with international fame. So this time, part of my answer is that, well, this military, and we're seeing it more and more, it had a certain job to do, and that was to midwife the royal transition. And they've done that before. You can see that they got a lot of slack. People gave them latitude. But now General Prayut is having a much harder time. The royal transition is taking place. So some people have been saying, well, your expiry date has gone now. What are you here for? What are you here for? So he's having to answer a lot more questions. Now, we haven't had the cremation yet. So in the Thai system, psyche, mindset, the royal transition is not complete. I haven't had cremation of the late king, His Majesty King Bhumibol. Haven't had the coronation of new king, His Majesty King Mahavajiralongkorn. So when all of that completes, then we might see a bit more noise from those places that you mentioned. That's one. Second, the Thai people are not, sometimes it's frustrating, but they're not revolutionary types. They don't have like a genuine, I just came from like Cambodia and went to like even People's Power, the origin in Manila. I mean, people around here, they put up with a lot. And what they're doing, the eerie science, they're waiting for the election. They're waiting for the election. So if this keeps happening, the election is then somehow manipulated or they become disappointed. So the question becomes, at what point do they, this Thai people say, we've had enough. In the past, judging from past records, 1973, 1992, it took some catalysts. So there has never been a successful, sustained, organic people's movement without organization, leadership, and some funding and so on. So it's good and bad. It's good, we're not into revolutions, in my view. But it's bad because people put up with so much and too much. So that would be my answer to that. And the third part would be that I think that this North and Northeast kind of dichotomy is overstated. You look at the referendum in August last year for the Constitution. The Northeast didn't vote for it, but turnout was pretty high, and overall, the North went for it, and the Constitution passed. So I think that there's been a dilution of whatever dichotomy that we've seen between the color lines over the past decade.
Question?
Michael Mackey, freelance. Just two quick questions, if I may. The first one's open to anyone. Kuntida from the UDD. There's a name that we've not even talked about till the questions came up. Recently suggested that maybe Pheu Thai, the UDD, should step out of the next government, effectively, I thought, calling the military's bluff. We have a Secretary General from Pheu Thai here. Would you do such a thing? And my question for Kundavakula is, you've talked, you made one reference to the deep state. Would you just like to elaborate it?
So I didn't get what Kuntida said. I'm sorry.
That the UDD and Pheu Thai should step out of the picture and just call the bluff, not participate. Actually, which is what
boycott,
opposite
right?
did.
Yeah, to boycott the election.
No, not boycott the election, boycott the parliamentary process afterwards.
You mean
What,
run in the election, but do not participate?
Yeah, not participate.
So they would be in Parliament, but they would just do nothing. Oh God!
As I understood it.
All right. Well,
I think that's the matter that Pheu Thai party may not have considered. And normally, when the party runs in an election and people vote for us, we have to carry out our mandate from the people. We cannot just doing nothing. So I do not understand clearly what Kuntida suggested, but I will try to check with her what she meant. Anyway, it is. I don't think it is likely that if we ran, people elected us, and we did not participate in the parliamentary process. Almost unthinkable.
yeah, highly hypothetical.
It's almost like being an opposition activist, but the thing in Thailand is different. If you understand how the media in Thailand works, is that if you're not in the picture, if you're not in the game, and if you're not in, let's say, if you're trying to, if you're locked in a house, or if you're out of the country, or if you're in the opposition but you're not joining, these parliamentary sessions and stuff, it's not like the media here will flock to you. So this is not like a U.S. media. It's very reality culture, pop culture, where you're doing interesting stuff and the media would give you coverage. The media in Thailand doesn't give you coverage unless you're there in the game. And so, so being an activist or an activist opposition or boycotting elections is difficult. So I think Pheu Thai probably has to maintain itself in the game.
Okay, that's one. Do you want to give us goose?
Yeah, well, just
state?
quickly, because you hear a lot of this rhetoric in the U.S. and I do a lot of comparative politics back to Thailand. The problem is this. The problem is that people are confusing, especially in I think in American culture and the right-wing side of things. They're confusing the deep state with the bureaucracy. See, every country need a well-functioning bureaucracy, right? You need a well-functioning State Department, with well-trained foreign service people. They basically help run the country, and they serve the democratically elected government. To me, that's a well-functioning democracy. Right? Now, if you're proposing to cut 30% of the State Department, you're not getting rid of the deep state. You're getting rid of a much-needed bureaucratic polity. Okay? Now, what I'm talking about Thailand is that we need a Steve Bannon in Thailand. We don't need a Steve Bannon in America. America is a well-functioning democracy. But you need a Steve Bannon here, because here you have a deep state. Essentially, what I'm talking about briefly, is that you got these organs that are really remnants of the 1997 Constitution. But in the 1997 Constitution, these organs, these independent organizations, were accountable to the democratically elected Senate. Now, with the advent of the current constitution, it's basically a continually regressive movement to make sure that these independent organizations are accountable, rather, not to the people, but to a purely selected Senate and basically a body of judges. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about basically institutions like the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which filed the motion against Kun Yingluck and Kun Bun Song. Without them, this case would not have been possible. The Constitutional Court, which over the past 10 years has been a detriment to Thai democracy. To me, there should not be a constitutional court in this country. The way that it has behaved, it should be dissolved. Aside from that, you got other organs, the armed forces. Essentially, the deep state in this case is this independent, self-sustaining, well, sustained by taxpayers' money, organs, you know, and bureaucracy that survive military coups, serve military coups, stick around, and basically prevent the democratically elected government from doing its full job. That's the deep state. And either you destroy that or you shift its allegiance. Both are difficult, but necessary to foster democracy.
Quick question.
Yes, my name is Moto Jean-Marie. I'm a member of the club. My English is very bad. I'm sorry. I hope that Dr. Folder will retranslate for me.
I can see the subtitles running, yeah.
Yes, thank you. And I have attended as a resident in Krung Thep 8 years now, many political meetings in Thailand, especially from the Pheu Thai, the Democrat Party, the last one in World Central Plaza, as you remember, the last democratic meeting in Thailand, and the cremation of General Katia at the time. And at the time, I met a very important leader for the Pheu Thai Party. I cannot publicly tell his name, but he told me this strange sentence: "We don't want foreigners in Thailand." I thought it was racist or something, or, you know, xenophobia, and it is not. I had forgotten that he was talking about the object, not the subject, the confusion between East and West, you know. So I'm asking you now if this object was innovation, the innovation brought into Thailand by the Westerners, belonging to the Democrat Party, but belonging also to the General Prayut, because innovation is the crux of the revolution. Usually, when innovation is coming in front of a traditional society, there is a clash coming from the ratio of production, and they don't accept this innovation. They are unable to learn. They are ignorant in front of technology. As a result, the army is the only way to compel the people to comply to innovation. So is it true? Is it this understanding of this sentence I should believe from this great leader who at the time was ready to be Prime Minister instead of Yingluck Shinawatra we are talking about today? You remember a meeting between Kun Abisit and leader of the Pheu Thai a few times after the crackdown in before the crackdown in Ratchapassong, and it was denied. At that time, Yingluck came into the scene. So do you find this sentence is conform to the word innovation, please? We don't want foreigners in Thailand. The countryside against the innovation is the city of Krung Thep. This is the meaning. Are you in agreement with this or not? Thank you, sir. I think you have the ability to answer my question, sir.
Okay, is Thailand immune to innovation?
Immune?
To innovation, I mean, this idea that it never actually changes, that you try and introduce something exotic like constitutional democracy, and it's not going to fly here. It's
technology, Dr. Folder.
Or technology specifically.
Not politics. You understand what I mean, Doctor? Innovation and tradition. When you break away from tradition, you enter into innovation. People are late, while other people are in advance. the engineer is in disagreement with the farmer, there is a clash.
Yeah.
This clash is a revolution,
right,
usually. But to prevent it in Thailand, the army came into power to say, everybody shut up, we follow innovation.
It's quite a complicated question, but maybe we can turn it around. The problem that we have with the rice pledging scheme is basically that there are too many farmers in Thailand. You have these very low-income people, all producing a product which
I think if you
sustain
mean
them.
innovation in the sense of like technology innovation,
Yes.
Of course, farmers may have some difficulty in trying and innovation, but they have changed as well. And besides, right now we have, for example, in some countries we have a smart farm, which they use new technology, sensor, they use analytic system to forecast, to tell you when to plant something, when to harvest. Those type of innovation, I'm pretty certain that the Thai farmers can accept those innovations. But normally, the Thai farmers are not wealthy enough to buy those innovations themselves. So by somehow, there must be a system that they may be able to have access to those type of innovation. And I truly believe that we cannot let our farmers do the farming in the old way. And we have to introduce new technology and innovation. So, because right now, farming subsidy may be more difficult to implement by the government. So the innovation and technology is an alternative to that.
Right. Marwan, are you waiting for?
Yeah, Marwan Mark of Nikkei Asian Review. You've been talking about the elections and you've been talking about the troubles political parties would have, but what has been absent here is the long game of the junta, their 20-year plan, and they have set up what seems to be like the Chinese Communist Party's Politburo to keep a future government in chains. So even if there's an election, what is the point of winning an election, because you would not be able to implement any of your policies that you campaigned on? It's a fiction, right? Elections in Thailand in the future?
The point is to, the point, if I were doing, propaganda, for the next election on the side of the Democratic, side, the Pheu Thai, whatever. Essentially, the point is to stick around so that one day you have the mandate to revamp the Constitution, get rid of the Senate, go further than that. Lessen the power of the National Anti-Corruption Commission, which is essentially, one of the organs of the deep state, and, do away with the Constitutional Court. That's the only way you pave way for parliamentary supremacy and improving, the ability of the executive branch to carry out policies. That's how you do it. Stick around. You don't have to implement policies. You have to get the mandate from the people that you will go in there and revamp what is essentially really just a constitution that is meant to preserve the reign of the current dictatorship. So stick around, fight the long game with them. I guess that's the way of describe it.
If you look how the members of National Legislative Assembly are working, you may think that the future senators will act like those NLA members. I do not see that same picture. Why? Right now, the members of NLA are trying all what they can to please General Prayut. Why? Because he has the power to make them senators. So they will please him, of course. But in the past, one prime minister appointed the whole batch of senators. When he was out of his office, the senators whom he appointed listened to him no more. So I do not believe that the future senators will always be loyal to General Prayut. Another point is that even if NCPO will submit the list of prospective senators, but it has to be sent to the Royal Palace. We have to see the new system, how the new system works for this type of nomination, which the NCPO may not get all the nominations, or they may get the whole nomination. We have to see, because it's the prerogative. It's not just like you can submit a list and it has to be returned in full.
Very quick response. First, the fix is in, if you will, kind of analogy. The fix is in, the rules are stacked. It's not a free and fair, so there's long-term plan. But we've had a lot of long-term plans in Thailand that have gone by the wayside very quickly. So once the election takes place, that's a juncture where things could really shift and change. But before that, we see a lot of kind of shenanigans and charade about the long-term plans. As Kun Pongthep said as well, the mood, the level of public support could also shift. So what we're seeing now in terms of trying to embed this long-term plan could fall by the wayside. Once the election takes place, all kinds of things can happen.
Just one point about the media. There's a National Broadcasting Commission that is in charge of the licenses of all the TV and radio stations. They can revoke these licenses at will. The problem is that Prayut will appoint the board, the National Broadcasting Commission, and that will be in power for 7 years. So they'll leave that behind. So that's a problem. That's a problem. It's difficult to get rid of these independent organizations, like I said. The ones in the Senate, I think after a while they'll be able to be lobbied, and it depends who's the army chief and stuff.
Yeah, just to pick up on Titinan's point, I mean, if you go back to the last time this was attempted at Suchinda, and he imposed himself on an elected cabinet and was eaten alive in 6 weeks. I mean, it is not the same thing to have an elected cabinet and a military cabinet. And Marwan, I was reading his interesting piece in the Nikkei this evening, and he pointed out that one of the reasons for the coup was corruption in the Yingluck government, and the Yingluck government hit 102 on the Transparency International Corruption Scale out of 175 countries. And by 2015, that situation had been pulled back to 76, so there was an improvement with the coup. But we're back to 101. So the pendulum has swung. Anyway, thank you all very much. I'd like to thank Natakorn for coming in, saving the day, Kun Pongthep for being very brave, and for coming, and Titinan, as always, for being fascinating. Thank you very much.
Just about right.
No, thanks.
You sure?
One
They do it, but that wouldn't happen.
Okay. So the G2G deal was never proven until they had and up until that point, those charged for something.
How are they going to write this?
Charged for something.
Because they were, so what would the verdict have been had you shown up on the same day that it was being sold? This is a good point.
I think I'm wondering whether
they prepare something.
I mean, it would have been easy because I wonder what in their ruling how they get around it.
Have they written these verdicts?
So that was in the press release.
I don't understand why they don't, even if you don't,
You know what these is, they're very long, have a dictaphone, so to transcribe it. Even in a normal court case, it takes 2 or 3 days to get the actual.
but it's almost like, well, we want to see that other verdict. That, because it had
whether it was on the same day or not, the point is, she had to be charged for failing to prevent corruption in this deal. But the deal has not been proven to be corrupt when she was charged.
No, but to me, the 800 billion buy, that's actually, to me, that's worse than corruption. Because that's just like, that's unsustainable. Yeah, this is the thing about this country. In this country, you can waste taxpayers' money as long as you don't put it in your pocket.
And I'm just curious, and there's a point of law, because Yingluck raised it on an occasion. He said they'd added additional charges on, which is not allowed to do actually. And the case where they got tried to me, dismissed part of his argumentation. This was obviously a political case. I just wanted to ask one thing. In the verdict, it seems the judge cited, let's be honest, with excessive costs, he cited the G2G deal as a failure. The G2G deal was not proven to be corrupt until the verdict against Yingluck. So how could she be charged for failing to prevent corruption when the time she was charged had not yet been proven to be corrupt on their verdict? And isn't that a point for an appeal? For a judge to appeal?
So
So basically, they incorporated the documents from an ongoing and unfinished case into the case against Yingluck, which I would assume is unethical anyway. Well, it's illegal. Justice.
at the same time, Yingluck attorney for the court